coffee. I got the special guest here for today's show, so we're ready to roll. I'm Michael Hanf, Executive Partner at Tyval Advisory. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. Today we're recording our first show, and I'm excited to get started. Now, technically it's the second show because we already had a test run a couple of days ago, but who's counting? Well, we hope the podcast will be interesting, insightful, and will provide some new perspectives. We're getting started. So everything will not be perfect from day one. So like a good sports pro, we will warm up, we will get used to the terrain, and we will find our footing. And then hopefully we will basically get into the swing. We hope you bear with us through these learnings and improvements. And if you have any improvement ideas or suggestions, please leave a comment or drop us a note at info@tyval.com. My guest today is passionate about sustainable business and new business opportunity creation, as his LinkedIn profile states, and he has a long background of working in advanced process automation, alternative fuel solutions, cleantech, and circular economy. For over 5 years, he worked in Neste NAPCON, where he, for example, did hold the position of head of NAPCON Strategic Business Unit and head of sales and marketing. NAPCON, and I had to look that up myself, is a business unit of Neste Engineering Solutions, and the original abbreviation comes from Neste Advanced Process Control, which was the APC product of NAPCON and is nowadays called NAPCON Controller. I'm sure our guest can help us a little bit more understand what that actually means. Anyway, from there he moved on to take responsibility for the algae initiative at Neste. Neste is looking into the use of algae as fuel and to support its renewable business in the long term. And some of the key topics in the algae initiative included business development, ecosystem building, co-creation of sustainable solutions, and development of partnerships. Since April 2020, he is the business development director at Tracegrow, a cleantech company that makes sustainable fertilizers out of micronutrients extracted and purified from recycled alkaline batteries and other sources. We will hear a little bit about that later in the podcast. I'm looking forward to jumping into all of that in our episode today. Thank you for joining me on the show today, Jaakko Nauha.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure, and I'm actually eager to look at our good discussion today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward. We had a short discussion already before we jumped in, so I think there will be a couple of really interesting topics that we will be touching on today. We met the first time when you were still at Neste, responsible for the algae initiative, and we discussed about the need to develop an active ecosystem to develop sustainable fuel solutions based on algae. Now, today, energy, and specifically energy from alternative sources, is in high demand. It's one of the top topics. So to get us warmed up, give us an idea of what did you learn in your time working in the algae initiative, and what are some of your key takeaways based for algae-based fuels?
Yeah, gladly. There's I guess a lot of things I learned, and there's a lot of it was a privilege to work with such a big group of experts on different areas, so to say. But few things we also, on the algae side, we also kind of communicated that to the algae community in different events on the algae biomass summit, etc. But kind of if you work with algae, it's not automatically sustainable. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to look at really how you're treating your basically your feedstock and what you're making out of it. So the process design and engineering and path concept makes a difference. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things. Then regarding the ecosystem, it's and I think this is something that Neste is really good at, and we've seen in the past years a lot of good news, especially on the mm-hmm. aviation side. But also kind of our key learnings was that if you're building something new, that's you need partners, mm-hmm. and you kind of need to work together. Mm-hmm. So it's not just like a simple transaction, but you're rather having an ecosystem where everybody gets something. Mm-hmm. So everybody has the motivation and meaningful role or kind of a reason to be there, mm-hmm. so to say. And I was actually, surprised by the, the colleagues I had there. How many of them were like, for example, eating minimum 1 day a week, like a vegan option or vegetarian. So many people were not working there just to work for a kind of a known company that's really driving the field, but they also were extremely passionate about sustainability and circular economy, so to say. And a lot of how should I say, that kind of put the level pretty high up. So to really a little bit sum up is kind of like that. If you just talk about the upper level concept or like algae, it's not automatically sustainable, and then basically you need partners on different sections. So you can't do anything by yourself. But overall, I really appreciated the work there, and I kind of the shift from, you mentioned about the NAPCON and the process automation. So there we were basically improving existing processes and saving energy. And I found that was really motivating every morning. But once I stepped to the algae, it was like a scaled 100 times. So the potential is so big, and there's a room for making impact, so to say. But at the same time, maybe additional learning was also that when there's a new thing, there's always the hype.
Yeah.
And the hype for algae was 10 years ago or so. And I mean, algae wasn't a new thing for Neste. So they'd been looking at it since 2007. But they'd been, how should I say, carefully watching it and taking a little bit step back when the hype was kind of crashing down in a sense, and seeing where it is. And it also shows that kind of after the hype, the ones who stay, those are the real players. And a lot of the algae companies had gone bankrupt because they had one idea or one concept that wasn't like going through the whole value chain or production. Like the worst, every 2 weeks I would have on average startup discussion with the algae company, run roughly. And many of them would have one good idea, but if it wasn't combined with the whole big picture. So the worst answer I got from different how should I say, technical or concept presentations that you can use the algae for whatever. And that meant that they hadn't done their homework. They didn't know what it could be used for. So the end market was missing. So that's kind of the challenge, that you need to have the technical solution and the business concept there.
I think that's very often the challenge, isn't it? Specifically in hype areas. It's like, you can use it for everything. It's like, it will only be really used and it will really be scaled once there are concrete use cases, once there's concrete value that you can extract from these new solutions. And that's exactly, as you said, where the ecosystem, where the partners come in, because everyone will need to play their role in the end-to-end value chain. It's very seldom one company or one player that can basically do it end-to-end in that context.
Yeah, exactly. And another comment maybe is also that Neste was, how should I say, like knew what they're doing, in a sense that when you bring something new, like the next BTL was done, so it takes time to develop it and get to the market, etc. So in the algae business, there's a lot of like existing business but notable business on the food side. And some industrial applications like putting algae as a omega-3 source to salmon feed. So that was so it was like taking the steps, but still to get to the fuels, it will take some years still. So more development.
Interesting, but I mean, specifically in today's climate, when we talk about energy and energy sources and all of that, it's definitely something that will still be there as one of the alternatives that will be looked into. Now, since April 22, so not that long ago, you are at Tracegrow, which I believe, in my definition, is one of the poster childs of circular economy based on what you're doing. And I understand that you make organic certified fertilizers from recycled alkaline batteries, which to me, at least when I heard it the first time, sounded very counterintuitive, because I was always told alkaline batteries is one of the things that's hardest to recycle. And it's something that should never leak into the nature. And you're creating fertilizers out of it that you put out into nature by design. For me as a non-expert and for our listeners, explain to us, how does that work? How do you get the material out of the batteries and you can actually use it as a fertilizer?
Yeah, gladly. So basically it's all about, I guess in this case, our company is a cleantech company. It's about the technology you use. And maybe I want to take one step back here on when people talk about not using batteries for food but yet every day you're putting food on top of a plastic plate or drinks on plastic cups.
Fair point.
That come from crude oil, and if they're
Fair
leaking
point.
to the sea, they make a big difference. So in that sense, what we actually get in practice is we get a black mass that comes from crushed alkaline batteries. So when alkaline batteries are recycled, they're collected, and then when they go for the recycling facility, they're sorted. So to say, different batteries, alkaline goes to different places where you have rechargeable batteries. They have a different chemistry in them. And then the alkaline batteries go through like a crushing machine that creates then a black mass. And we get that black mass to our facility. And then we treat it chemically. So two main components what we collect from there is zinc and manganese. And if you look at this like arable or farming lands in the world, 50% of the soil is deficient in zinc and 10 is deficient in manganese. So because our agriculture has been very efficient, and basically the lands are getting more and more poor in a sense. So and those are valuable components, and a lot of them come from mines. So basically we see that the mining operation and the elements what we get out of them, they're so valuable that we should not throw them to the bin. And like you said, that if you put alkaline batteries to the normal trash, they are like harmful. So in that sense, when you're listening to this, think of when was the last time you recycled your alkaline batteries, and if you didn't, start it now. In Finland, every second people it's 50% the recycling rate. So in this room, there's two of us, and I know I'm recycling my alkaline batteries. So statistically,
I do as well. I do as well. I have this huge pile of batteries in a box, and I return that to the shop every time I go there. So
there you go.
But it's great to hear that there's something, because very often, I mean, you have this, like you bring something back for recycling and you have no idea what's happening afterwards. And batteries for me always was this black box. I bring it back to, I don't know, Clas Ohlson or to the supermarket or to wherever. And like, okay, what happens with the batteries afterwards? So it's great to hear that there's really something useful that can be made out of those.
Yeah, exactly. And what you just said here, I've heard that many times before from the different kind of what do you call it, like associations in Finland. It's Rexel that's looking at like the producer's responsibility and collecting. So every country has similar things, and every one of them has said that if we can be more transparent what happens to the recycled batteries, people will recycle more of them. And so we're kind of in an early phase in our company, but plans to scale up are pretty aggressive, let's put it that way. And kind of what we're doing now is we're chemically treating the black mass. So we dissolve it first, and then we clean it up. And in the end, we have a few different processes. So there's like a mechanical separation first to get the plastics and cardboard out. So those are different. And then we basically take the zinc and manganese, we dissolve them and get them separated. And then comes still a cleaning part where all potential like unwanted metals, for example, or harmful elements are separated. And then in the end, we have a safe fertilizer. That's we call it a micronutrient. So manganese and zinc are the main components, and typically it's applied to the field by spraying on top of the plant. So when the plant has leaves, you spray it on top of those, but also combining the spraying with coating the seeds beforehand. That's we've got really good results. So in Finland, we actually did oats trials. So a year ago, the seeds were coated with the zinc and manganese product, ZM Grow, and then one with recycled copper added as well, so ZMC. And then they were put into the ground, and we got 20% yield increase.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's 20% from the same land area where you would farm. And how should I say, like it shows that the plant is not using all the macronutrients, so like nitrogen, or NPK is like nitrogen, potassium, and kalium, like the macronutrients that are put on the ground. Those are not efficiently used if the plant is lacking zinc and manganese. So when you provide these and the plant is healthy, it grows faster. And also the size of the roots were doubled. So basically, we haven't got the math for that yet, but in principle that could be a carbon sink as well. But for the farmer's point of view, we have recycled material that's easy to use, and the end specs are good, but then it also increases the yield, so profitable. So the sustainability angle comes as a plus for the farmers.
And I understand it's organic certified, so
Yeah,
which
it
is
is
another important element, I guess, for farmers that are looking to basically grow organically.
Yeah. So and typically, my understanding is that the micronutrients are acceptable on a general level for organic use. What makes us different is that the plant doesn't have any chimneys, so there's no CO2 emissions. There's no wastewater. So all the water is recycled back to the process.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's kind of a closed loop for the wastewater.
Okay.
And if we look at now, when we discussed what happens to the batteries if we're not treating them, typically those go to some kind of an incineration plant or smelter where the manganese is burned and only zinc is collected.
Yeah.
And we've done initial LCA calculations looking at if we would make our products from virgin materials and over 90% comes from Asia, manganese. So looking at also the transportation of those. So looking at refining, mining, refining, and then transportation to Europe. And then also looking at what's the effect of traditional treatment of alkaline batteries. And we looked at that compared to the alternative methods, we're carbon negative. But if we look at the big scope 3, we see 70%, up to 70% of CO2 emission reductions.
Wow. Okay.
So it's, how should I say? It's pretty. It's concrete. It's
absolutely
available in that sense. And one of the things that I like about this whole concept is that it's scalable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talked about growth. You talked about scalability. I mean, in August last year, you closed an investment round with Nordic Food Tech VC. And at the end of the year, there was an announcement about a cooperation with Boliden, where Boliden Kokkola will supply manganese sludge to Tracegrow, and then Tracegrow will utilize the raw material side stream for the manufacturing of manganese products. So what does that now mean for the development of Tracegrow and the solutions that you're offering? Because I understand you're going beyond this idea of using recycled alkaline batteries as an input, which naturally increases the impact and the scalability you have.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. So this is, I guess, a good example about talking about ecosystem.
Yeah.
So this is a clear statement in the sense that Boliden is interested in environmental topics, and they're willing to work with smaller new technology providers, so to say. And what typically happens with them is that they get a manganese sludge as a side stream or as a kind of leftover. They neutralize it, they put it in a landfill. So it's not really usable for them. They don't have much value for it. But then in this way, there is a second life for that. And so first of all, on alkaline batteries, we have a zinc and manganese. So similar technology works for these kind of industrial side streams as a manganese directly. But what we also see interesting in this is scalability on also new different end use applications. Because zinc and manganese work nicely as a fertilizer. But once you have a manganese sulfate as a separate, it can have a higher concentration because it's basically physical is limiting the zinc and manganese concentration. So you can have a more dense manganese solution, and that can be used, for example, to fertilizer blending or different kind of applications on the fertilizer industry, or it can be used as direct component, but also can be used in other chemical industry applications. So currently, main go-to-market channel for us has been the different retail channels, like the major ones in Finland. They're all selling some of our products, and they sell directly to the farmers. But this is also moving us from going from farmers and the retail stores to actually industrial partners.
That's true,
And then we talk about larger volumes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is something we like because we would like to grow and have organic growth faster and more. So in that sense, it's a big step in using having a second a foot to stand on the feedstock side, but also we're broadening the markets we're selling to.
I think what's fantastic, and I think that's something we're seeing more and more, is that also companies like Boliden, but also many other companies are starting to look at their side streams, look at their waste streams as completely new ways of revenue, of providing products, of providing an outlet in that context. And in that context, that's exactly what you do. You basically give that side stream a new life, so to say, if you want. And you're actually not downcycling or basically reducing the quality, but you're basically bringing it to the market as a very valuable, high quality, highly sought after product at the end of the day. And I think that is so fascinating about that fact.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of on the circular side, that you take a non-valuable feedstock and you turn it into something that's really valuable. And well, COVID, of course, made a difference. And then the things going on in Europe on this Russian war. Yeah. So that kind of changed the whole fertilizer industry. It had a big change there. So that had a big effect. And when you look at these kind of locally recycled feedstock like alkaline batteries, those are there anyways.
Yes.
So they're regional, they're available, and they're more stable in a sense. Then kind of the fertilizer pricing has gone 3 times higher this year, early this year. Yeah. Now it's gone a little bit down, which is good. Yeah. But kind of showing that I guess it's kind of, there's been this term, I don't know if I'm using it correctly, but kind of like an urban mining type of thing. Yeah. So, and this is something that even if a country doesn't have its own mine, but people are using alkaline batteries. Yeah. Like in Europe, there's 100,000 tons of alkaline batteries recycled every year. So there's quite a big of a pool. In Finland, it's only 1,500. Yeah. So there's a tremendous potential, even just in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I read an article recently exactly about that fact, that supply chains are basically coming back onshore, and that we're starting to use more of our local resources. And as you said, recycling, urban mining, all of these things naturally become a whole different value in that context. Earlier, it wasn't of any value. Nowadays, it's a value in itself because you have the material close by. So I think that's a really, really excellent point in that context.
Yeah, and I guess, well, I'm not sure, but I'll jump into this. But this, like, end of last year, there was a lot of, in a way, I think, bigger picture, positive news. But overall, like, the biodiversity was discussed a lot in December, and that was raised up. And when you do this kind of recycling, you're not increasing the burden on biodiversity. Absolutely. Rather, you're actually lowering the pressure to mine more the virgin materials. And actually, there's a lot of unused materials, so we could change the balance quite a bit, so to say.
Yeah, and I mean, you can imagine models when all of a sudden batteries become resources of new raw materials. They get, so old batteries now, it's not waste, but it's something where you can even think about putting a price tag onto them, having a return system like you have with bottles and cans. And with that, you naturally, I mean, if I get 5 cents back on my battery, I have a much higher incentive to return that than I have if it's basically just work for me to get it to a place and I don't even know what will happen with it afterwards. So I think you can think about all of these models where all of these raw materials that I read a quote once: waste is raw materials that haven't found an identity. So I think it's the same here. So you can think about all of these new models where you actually put a price tag, where you put a monetary value onto these resources.
Yeah,
so.
And I think overall on the battery industry, the transfer to electronic vehicles is pushing a very positive pressure on it. So also in the end of the year, there was a discussion in Europe about the battery passport, and that's basically moving forward. So idea is that you kind of have an identification that where does the battery raw material come from, what is the carbon footprint, and then not only stopping after it's been used, but what happens afterwards. So kind of the recycling mandates, and I think this is once we go forward with the electronic vehicles, there's going to be a lot bigger masses of similar type big batteries that are going to be recycled. So it's kind of raising the topic on the table, really.
Absolutely, and I think it has been a topic already that people talk about, which is one of the big downsides. You know, what do we do with the batteries once they're at the end of life? And if you can find solutions where you can use them in different ways, in a positive way, I think that definitely helps with that.
Yeah, and then kind of looking at the batteries, like how should I say, alkalines is different than lithium batteries. Typically with lithium batteries you have hoarding, like you have your own cell phones in a drawer at home and you don't know what to do with them and you're keeping them there and they might burn, etc. But with alkaline batteries, typically it is so you either recycle it or you throw it to the bin. So kind of when we can transparently show what you do with it, then hopefully less is thrown to the bin and rather you actually do your own good act on the biodiversity and recycle it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of another topic in this section was also that now in EU there's been discussion about the carbon tolls that would also cover the fertilizers. And this is a very interesting topic in a sense that money is driving. And farmers, it's not easy to be a farmer.
Yeah.
So everybody is running their own business, so to say, and money counts. So kind of course, we don't want to raise the fertilizer pricing for the farmers, and we've seen how bad that is for many, and they haven't been able to use it, so to say. But then rather, it's also pushing people to be more efficient what they have.
Yeah, sure.
So if you put macronutrients in them, and you could have, say, 20% less of macronutrients when you use micronutrients, for example. So you increase the efficiency, but also it doesn't really make sense that in Europe we have a strict emission restrictions, and then you get whatever from outside of Europe. So in a sense that puts a little bit of pressure, but it also evens the game that if you look at the recycled material, if it has, say, 5% higher price, we are actually very price competitive. So in that sense, it's good. But if it has a higher price, when you have the carbon toll, then you're actually putting a price value, or value rather, for the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you know, I'm always a big fan of looking at the big picture. So if you look at one specific element, you might say like, it's a plus or minus. But I mean, you were talking about so many different things. I mean, if you have a higher yield of 20%, that's a direct monetary impact. And if we look around the world, there is a shortage in many places. So if you can increase the yield, that's a huge impact. The second thing, you talked about the carbon sink, the possibility because of the bigger roots, that could be a carbon sink. If that is true, there will be carbon trading schemes that you could potentially consider. I'm not sure if that's an option or something, but that is something you could. So you need to look at this from a bigger picture perspective. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of basically narrowing down on one specific element and basically making something bad because that one specific element doesn't work without really looking at what does that mean from a bigger. You mentioned biodiversity. Fresh water is a huge topic that will hit us very, very soon. So there's all of these things taken together, and if we look at those together, I think the picture becomes different than if we only look at the price of fertilizer or of a specific recycled or circular product.
Definitely, I fully agree. And kind of what I feel currently very empowering is the fact that we are basically increasing the yield of the crops. So we're supporting the global food issue that is there. But at the same time, we're lowering the pressure on the mining side. So we're affecting on the CO2 emissions. And then at the end also the industrial side streams that are not used, or the alkaline batteries that could be harmful if not treated correctly. So we're solving a kind of a waste challenge in a sense.
Exactly. So I mean, looking at that and looking at your role at the business development director, I mean, what are the next steps for Tracegrow? What is the end game? Where is all of this leading towards?
That's a good question. We're looking for growth, and we have a lot of discussions with different partners. We're already selling to, I think, 17 different countries now, and how should I say, we're in an accelerated growth phase. So we've gone to the right direction. We've done a lot of good things, and now we're also looking for bigger partners that we want to work with that are capable to grow with us, so to say. But ideally, if you look at kind of like how should I say, what would be a dream come true? It would be that all the alkaline batteries would be collected, recycled, and treated into use, and also all the industrial side streams that are there. There are multiple different applications, so that those would be collected, and this way we would, in a way, how would I say, the food industry is not fully like a closed loop, but the battery, like the electronic vehicle industry is kind of looking at that. If you can, for example, rotate lithium, the food industry is different. But if from the mine to the food. If in between the elements have a life of a battery for longer term, and they do something good, and then you use it for food. So then kind of you just have an intermediate step, and you're using it fully.
Which naturally is the idea of circular economy, isn't it? I mean, you use material in different forms, in different products, in different setups, and then you can reuse them again and again in these different forms. So that's why I said in the beginning, I think it's somewhat of a poster child from a circular economy point of view.
And maybe coming back to the future, what I've seen already in this short time at Tracegrow is that also the agriculture industry is changing. So, how should I say? The farmers are very aware of all the environmental topics and issues. They're interested in them. But also the big fertilizer companies, they do have their own how should I say, ideas, mentality, and they're seeing the change.
Yeah.
So world is changing. I guess question is more what is the pace, and who's going to be running it first, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have seen tremendous change in the world over the last couple of years in that regard. Awareness, but also willingness to do things. Cool. The coffee is empty, and it's unfortunately time to wrap up this episode of the Circular Coffee Break. I still have a long list of questions and a lot of topics that I have in my mind. Maybe you need to come back another day for another coffee. There's never enough coffee, so from that point of view, let's keep that in mind. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments, ideas, or suggestions, please let us know by leaving a comment or sending us a note at info@taival.com. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on new episodes. That will be dropping every 2 weeks going forward with a lot of very interesting guests. We have a long list of really interesting people that I'm looking forward to talk to. And Jaakko, you will need to be coming back. There's a lot of things we haven't covered yet. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you here on the Circular Coffee Break.